Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 23 of BrewFOs. Today, my guest is Dr. IYA WHITELEY. She's an aviation and space psychologist. She's the director of the Center for Space Medicine at the University College of London. She's worked with NASA. She's worked with cosmonauts. You're a pilot, a master skydiver, scuba diver, a mother. Thank you for coming on the show. And cheers. Do you have anything to drink? I didn't ask if you...
Oh, I'm good. Yes, I've got a little mug, so I'm good.
So cheers to you, IYA, for coming on.
Cheers. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Good. Lovely to be here. Thank you for making this happen and for inviting to speak with the audience. I'm looking forward.
Yeah, I know you're teaching a class right now with Diana Pasulka.
Yeah.
And I guess since that's so fresh, can we just talk a little bit about that? It's called Navigating Inner Space, How High Performers Read the Moment. That sounds very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was Diana. She's wonderful in bringing new topics and research ideas and where we can dive, and especially jointly. And we have been pondering about working together, and this seemed to naturally came together. Her interest and not just interest, but academic research in historical figures and looking at original records of religious figures and events that would be considered extraordinary, and reading original diaries in original language, and looking into how these individuals, or historically, they had inner knowing. And of course, Diana's book, American Cosmic and Encounters, also looks into current figures that are also mentioned, her encounters with them, on how these people have inner knowing of what to do and how to do it. And so this is the interlace of how we connect. And I'm looking through my experience, personal as well as academic, and research, applied research, working with pilots, astronauts, surgeons, and cosmonauts, and seeing how can we bring that out and what kind of methods that could allow our personal exploration of inner space. And so we had our first class, and I started with examples of where the inner knowing is visible and what we can trace, how we can tap into our inner knowing when that happens. And as we progress, we will be diving further into what kind of contemplations we can do, how can we overcome obstacles that prevents us from maintaining perceptual openness and awareness, something that in aviation called situational awareness. In mission control, it's called a bubble, and a bubble of the situation, so that everybody is aware, because it's a team effort rather than one individual. And you never want to be behind in aviation aircraft or mission progress, how the events happen. And that's why there is always, like in mission control, there's a big board where everybody can know where things are happening. And of course, individual, like for example, flight controller that controls internal systems, life support systems, engines and so on, and experimental setup if it's International Space Station. And so everybody can chip in, but they have an overview. And of course, the flight director then can speak to individual experts to find out what the situation is. And in the cockpit, that would be, you would be talking to your co-pilot, to the air traffic control. Previously, there would be a navigator and also an engineer on board, which are now replaced with onboard computers, just like, in spacecraft now as well. And there is still the need to dive into the systems, because although the system have something on the display, you still have to, previously something that could have been done by navigator, you have to watch the weather, you have to watch the maps, changing routes, anything that happens with the aircraft, you always have to have plan A, B, and C and in this case, it's like an expanding network. You could say it's a changing, if you take a thread and you loop it around where the aircraft is on the map, it would change its shape depending on the weather and availability of extended runways that would fit your aircraft type, or, they would be able to service your craft. So they have to keep that in mind, although with all of that, you think they're just flying, but actually they're resolving very complex pieces of information that they weave together as a team, and they converse. It's quite, I guess, maybe funny that, adults sitting together and they would say, I have controls, and the other one would say, yes, you have controls. And, heading, 140, and the other person would say heading 140. And so that there is, because these procedures or these things override what we assume, that the other person heard it and I said it correctly. And we are like acting like a backup for each other in that instance. So we're bringing these two streams, I guess, from extreme environments, so safety and time critical environments, and, Professor Diana Pasulka's work and her encounters with the current, I guess, state of affairs is the best way to put it. So it's beautiful. It's nice to blend together.
Yeah. And that technical, and then the inner knowing that you're talking about, is that inner knowing, is that just like wisdom we get from whatever consciousness is, or is that something we all possess, or like, what do you think about that?
Yes, I dive more and more into aspect of consciousness, not the one that's defined in psychology, so like being unconscious, but referring to a grander field of awareness or non-duality, or there's, many ways to, conceptually that named in cultures, also in traditional native people, they also have concepts of that, of the divine, the sky people, and the land, and the mother, and many ways of describing that support system. I do see that it filters into safety critical environments, and I feel that I have observed that, and people do report this from safety critical environment, but it's not studied from academic point of view as yet. And, there are many academics now talking interested, and the field is opening up. So we know that Noetic Science Institute, so Institute of Noetic Science, IONS, is diving in, very swiftly. There is a University of North Carolina, I believe, look into past lives and near-death experiences. So there are many institutions, and now more private institutes that rise up, and research organizations, such as, for example, so I think is it Institute of Consciousness, but it's Bigelow Institute.
Oh yeah.
That looked into a proof of afterlife. So his as he sold Bigelow, which is the reason I got to know it is because they were doing inflatable structures to be deployed in space.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Which was how I kind of come to listen to what he was in the news, and I wanted to know what it was about. It was about February during COVID, early on, like first to second year. And he announced with a very few brief sentences saying, there is over 7 billion people on Earth and we're all going to die. Why is nobody interested where we're heading? And it was very compelling. And he put a competition to say who can scientifically prove that life after this transition or death continues in some other form. So that's another way of looking at that, I guess, survival of our knowing, or maybe where the knowing comes from, maybe because we're looking from our perspective. And
and that
yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
No, the childbirth visions that I was on that website, and there's all these mothers talking about this knowing too, and some from like almost like previous lives coming into this life. So like it's not just what's after death, but it's like what's before life.
Yes, and that is fascinating for me. So I studied regression as a regression practitioner. I'm interested in various techniques and to see how we can, how can we equip ourselves for knowing of any kind? Because in critical situations, that is part of what we are exploring. We're not diving into, very technical individual path, but Diana and I invite the audience, the participants to explore, because I feel through, my individual research and also working with practitioners and also working with people who are interested to explore, that has to be fine tuning. It's not one fit all technique. So it's sort of like when you sit in the car, you adjust the seat, to be yours, because otherwise you can't reach the pedals. So you adjust the mirrors and it's kind of adapting techniques that exist. And traditionally in every culture that I come across on pretty much every continent, I haven't been to Antarctica, that there is a tradition that has a way to tap into our inner knowing. It could be in North Indian, for example, not North Indian, North American native traditions. So Canada, North America, they have a tradition of having spirits that they send to find something that they need to know, that they travel for them. And that is in sacred drumming practices. And that is very widely, taught to Western culture as well. And it's beautiful that some people feel that they can tap into that space. And it's a way of tapping into, I guess, another state of awareness, or also called altered state, where you, through sound, through breath, which is another technique I'm deeply passionate about and explore at the moment, and through dance, even through laughter, because laughter also changes how we breathe and changes our chemistry. And you can be sleep deprived. You could oversleep, you could lucid dream. There are many ways of accessing that space. And I'm interested how we can find a tool that fits individually to us. And I believe that consciousness is a field, or another way, like Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talks about morphic resonance and morphic field, which is the knowing of how, for example, some plants, it's not only in genes, but the environment has some information that is then tapped in by plants, animals. And that's how we have forms of knowing or telepathy, who calls us, or our animals know when we are coming home. And these type of examples, which we can do ourselves. We don't need to have, very many years of practice, or, other people help us. We all have experienced this somewhere in our life path.
Yes, it's like when we invented the internet or made the internet, it's like there was already a universal internet that we could search Google with our, I don't know if it's our brain, but our consciousness, or something. Like you can tap into something that's already there, but we're just trying to replicate it with technology. But so that's so wild for, I was talking to Chrissy Newton, Rebelliously Curious. Yes. That's her podcast. Everyone, I'll check that podcast out. You had a great conversation with her, but, what was I just saying about that though? I was talking to her about you, and I just lost my thought when I brought her up. That's so funny. No, but I was talking to her. Come back to me. But we're talking about the internet being there. Oh, this is what it was. Sorry. So, that's a brain fart that happens to us. But it's that you bring to this conversation, whether it's telepathy, the consciousness, this inner knowing stuff that, like you were just saying, that it's not like academically, like it might have been looked down at, or it's not studied yet. But you really bring this, like, just this professionalism and like this quality of I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but it's so cool that you're talking about this publicly. And I just want to, like, so do you think this is real? Like you think that
what do you mean? What is real?
When I'm talking about this phenomenon of telepathy, this phenomenon of inner knowing, this phenomenon of like tapping into this thing. And sorry about the brain fart there. I was just, this is exciting talking to you, but like, you bring this quality to this subject because your background is crazy, like talking to you, it's seeing everything you're trained in, all the people you've worked with, surgeons, firefighters, and then hearing you talk about this, I think that's why it's overwhelming, because you do bring this quality that's like, wow, okay, this might be real. And for people listening, they're going to be like, wow, okay, she's saying this,
Well, I guess depending on the perspective that we look at, that's what we're doing with a class with Diana Pasulka, is that we're looking of how is this tracked historically, the professionals that Diana come across now, the professionals I came across working with, and also my personal investigation, because I feel through applied research, which is what I feel more drawn to, and I feel that I get the data that I could work with. I find that we need to have the experience in order to be able to articulate and also converse and meet the other person at the level where they're at, because then we're not starting from scratch, but we can all have touch point, just like learning to fly, to be able to ask the questions that could then be extended, and we are almost meeting literally on the same level, flight level. And we have the same perspective, because if I have just learning to fly made me pay attention differently in the world. So I was a 2D person, if you wish, meaning like more bound to this horizon. And I would never, I'd look out at the clouds and look at the birds and trees, but it wouldn't be my way of scanning. But if you're working with a pilot who is professional, not like I am, an amateur and, occasionally fly, but they scan always a cupola. Yeah. They are aware, and they always, because they have to do this in their everyday work, they have to plan ahead based on what has happened before. And they are planning for every eventuality they can think of. So they're not taking this, only in flight. They do this on the ground all the time. So if you're, taking a trip with them, to a supermarket, or you're going to the coast, or, you're planning a barbecue, like in Australia they do, they would have thought of all the safety features and, all the children around, or all the eventuality of running out of this or that, which, we ordinarily do, but they really go overboard with that because it is how their mind works. And also they work in a team, and it feels like they know what will happen. For example, you're standing and doing a barbecue, they would think about where to place, hot items. They would see, some incoming, something incoming, and they would step in because they are working ahead all the time. And we just don't have that awareness trained. And it feels like presentiment, like as if they knew it's going to happen. And yes, in a way, yeah, because they've kind of have foreseen that this could happen. So they've put a cushion in a way under, in a sense, so cushion that situation. But equally, because they are so observant, their mind almost catches instances before they literally could develop. And there is an element of that they could have not known. It's not like, a child was running, the fire was on, and it will happen. They're literally able to see clues that we can't. So I have observed that, and also heard from pilots themselves talk about that they knew it will happen, and there was no evidence that you could scan with instruments or through other people that will happen. And we can't unpack how they knew. We can, so the place I'm working with, or the best way that I feel that we can tap into it, academically, personally, through individual experience and exploration, is that I feel they gain a particular state. So it's a state of awareness rather than, have a continuous knowing. So it's something that they arrive at through their training, through their experience. And it's not a particular trait. I don't think it's a trait, because I have also done crew selection. I've done extensive personality testing and methods of working, like, for example, and not all of your personality necessarily translates on how you work, how you're at work and how you're at home, and how you interact in the various circumstances. Even your personality, let's say introvert, but you could be very extrovert in some situations. So it's not that. I feel that can be fine-tuned. And the practices that are in traditions that I'm exploring and have been exploring, since very young, because of, have opportunity to enter martial art, and that opened up the kind of Eastern philosophies. I could start seeing that, well, actually different cultures think differently. They do have different cultural awareness. And, like, for example, just like a very grounded example, like in China, in the Chinese languages, they have specific tonal aspect to the language. So a lot of Chinese people are beautiful singers, not necessarily because they have extraordinary talents, it's because their environment demands for them to be perceptive and fine-tuning on various musical aspect of how we speak, or the tonality. And they might have an accent, but you know, the how they sing is extraordinary, and it's across their culture. So, and that's trainable. So we can actually, those who are not trained, let's say we don't have good, we're considered to be tone deaf. This is actually exposure, which is interesting, which has now been, there's a professor, Japanese professor Suzuki, which developed methodology to train children use the sound before they start to play. So they learn the musical composition before they then find it almost on the whatever instrument, the piano. He started with the violin, but it spread to piano as well. And his family was building violins, so they had a factory of violin building, but he had not played violin ever. So he did not grow up playing, and he did not know how to play. Much later, in fact, in Germany, and I believe, I wouldn't say it, but anyway, but there were some extraordinary violinists that he came across, and he started to learn there. So, and he then understood that, you know, that skill can be picked up and learned differently. You don't have to, if you are exposed enough to music or to that tone, which if you are in a family of musicians, you would intuitively, you would be naturally, you know, hearing that. But, so you could be not born in that family, but you could be just for some reason developing that ear, let's say, for example. You know, I don't know about I just don't know. I just know that from the research of newborns that we all come prepackaged with all sensors completely open. Mm-hmm. And then by 6 months, we start to be specialized in the environment that we're exposed to. Let's say we are born in whistle language. You know, then we would know how to, and our vocal cords would start to also mimic, you know, the sounds that we hear. And that's why if we're not exposed to a particular accent that's very unique, it's very hard for us to then, not necessarily, it's not even about replication, but because we haven't heard it enough, we can't reproduce it. So it goes two ways. But if we hear it enough and practice it, we actually can gain it. But it would just to take a longer to build those pathways that have been rewired. We have to. If you can imagine, you could have an infrastructure of a city that is a language, you know, that's built and it's got, you know, water, electricity, roads, pathways, houses, you know, bridle ways and so on. And then suddenly they bring, like, I don't know, in the UK, they would bring the fiber, and suddenly they, you know, all the roads and pathways to implement the new infrastructure, but it's not efficient. It's bound by where they get the permission to put the fiber. So, and the same thing for us is that we can, from birth, if that's why I'm, you know, have this Cosmic Baby Academy, because I just want parents to be aware, and for us as adults also to understand that we have a complete spectrum of development, considering everything as well, of course, in the natural development. And we can then, by not limiting the child, but like exposing them to different languages, to different cultural songs, to different sounds of nature, to leave it wide open and not question them when they start saying that they're seeing or hearing things, and not in the way that we're used to. Like they would say, I hear this frog singing blue, and you would say, you mean the frog is croaking, but actually they actually expressed correctly. They probably heard the sound and saw the color blue. And that's a phenomenon of synesthesia, and there are over 150 pairings of how our senses cross. So what if these extreme environments or safety critical professions have developed this, even factors of synesthesia that nobody's testing for, that gives them this extra clues that, for example, they, so something, let's say, if you're trained and flew more, relied not on automation to give you more information, but like ideally all pilots learned for a long time to fly manual, craft, which you start from a private pilot license, and you're flying very physically. So it feels like extension of your body. And you could even have sensations in your body if the wings tip, if the rudder shifts, you could have it, almost in the back of your body. And you're flying literally by the seat of your pants. This is what they say. So, and if some people can perceive some changes in how the wind sounds that passes the aircraft, on the angles of fine-tuning, like for example, I flying commercially, I know when we level off before they announce it. I know when we start to descend before they announce it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but meaning that because I've got this awareness of how that all feels, it just comes to me, because it's change, it's a change that I am attuned to. It doesn't mean that other people don't feel it, they don't pay attention to it. That's different. Yeah. So the inner knowing is the same. I feel that that there is a gap, like between the musical notation, there is a pause, right? And in that pause, if we don't have that, those musical notes will mash and will not hear the individual structure. So the music would take a different character. So that pause or that breath, or exhale, it allows for some information to be available, because pause is still information, a gap. And that gap fine-tunes us to hear or see or perceive or allow something to filter into our awareness. And the longer if we can control time, which it looks like it is perceived differently in safety critical situations. So when people are very, in a fast, rapidly changing, they feel like you probably come across that when, for example, I trip and it feels like everything has slowed down and everything is in slow motion, and I could see it coming, that fence or border, but there's nothing I can do. I just have to flow with that and, and deal with the consequences. But somehow almost like the processing of the information is different, but the time is not long. Or like, for example, when I started skydiving, it felt like, those 45 seconds before you need to pull, to open the parachute. It's just like suddenly, it's such a long time, like you could do so much in 45 seconds or, 50, because depending, they never take you quite high enough to get that 1 minute, those extra 15 seconds that you really want. and the time perception is so different, on what people working in safety critical environments or surgeons, on how they see time is very different to how a pilot sees time and how a painter sees time. And all of them are helpful in entering those states.
Yeah. You made me think of, there's so much there, but Dr. Gary Nolan was on the show, yes, and he was talking about the caudate putamen and how there's a neural density for some of the MRI he's looked at and some of the patients. But I'm neurodivergent, I'm autistic, and in the community, there's studies done that our caudate putamen is larger than neurotypical people. And that's what, is responsible for intuition and awareness and decision-making. And it brings in a lot more senses and sensory things. And I've brought this up before, but I went to the DMV, and for some people, they're just like, I hate the DMV because, I have to wait and all this stuff. Like, I don't mind waiting for stuff. I'm pretty patient. But when I'm there, I'm getting all the smells, I'm getting the lights, I'm getting the buzzing, I'm getting all this stuff that other people aren't caring about. I'm hearing, I'm seeing somebody doing something that's gross, or they're being mean to somebody. Like, I'm seeing all this stuff at once, and I don't like just being on my phone all the time, but, I'm not saying I'm like, I know there's people more hyper aware than me, but I was just wondering, in these people that you've studied and worked with, are any of them neurodivergent, or is that, I know you're saying there hasn't really been a commonality, but I was wondering, has there been any neurodivergent people with the people you've studied that have high awareness?
Absolutely so.
Okay.
For one, they were not tested for, this is the generation I worked with. This was not very expressed, for one. People were not tested. And as you may be aware, in schools, you just had to get on with it. Mm-hmm. You were either considered that, you're just different, but they would not do anything about it, meaning different that you are not highly academic. And but some people would be really good in physics and really not good in math. And the expectation was that you should be good in math, like all sciences, if you are good in one. But it also depends on who your teachers were and how interesting it was for you. Because I find that people who have a wider focus, if you wish, so more perceptually attuned into, like there's more stimulus, it seems like, coming in that needs to be filtered. They are really good at focusing if they've got an interest. And in fact, they could focus for longer and go deeper than people who are considered to be, precise, focused, organized. They actually can't diversify in so many fields as effectively. So there's everyone have their own advantage, if it makes sense. So yes, there are people that I have seen that are, I would say, neurodivergent. And I think that's why some of them excel at what they do. But we have a capacity to adapt if we are open to it. So it's not... what I don't particularly appreciate, I think it's helpful, the diagnosis is helpful as a strategy to deal with something, that is sometimes explanation gives us an opportunity to explore further, but sometimes that gives a label that then people don't do anything about. And so if such a big number of neurodivergency is happening right now, well, that must be a reason for it. And maybe it's actually something that should be mainstream rather than being catered individually for. It's just that we had no capacity in education, and I think we're struggling deeply now, having children in school, that it's the teachers are just overwhelmed and they don't have the tools, but they're expected to, and that's also not fair. So it's sort of like there's a dual expectations as a system. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't have enough resources to dive in, but the diagnosis happen. And I think it's more helpful to look at opportunities of what can we do with it, rather than label it and then just what's the word I'm looking for, is because it's classified as disorder, and I think it's an advantage. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and it's just that the society is still adapting to what this extra capabilities are capable of contributing. I guess that's what I'm saying. Because the educational system that is set in its ways has difficulty adapting. But these children are quicker, they pay attention faster, they absorb more information, and it's the delivery that is challenging. In fact, for people who are not neurodivergent, they are also struggling, if it makes sense. Because there's such a widespread of information and catering for such a diversity that it's hard for teachers. So we're not doing favor to either at the moment. Anyway, that's my current, like having children in school. I see that challenge on both sides, for parents, for children, and teachers. You want to be helpful on all sides. I just wanted to come back to something you mentioned, and I have a tendency to diversify.
Oh, it's okay.
So you mentioned about childbirth and saying that there is childbirth visions.
Yes.
There are some parents, not necessarily even mothers, sometimes there are fathers, uncles, and sisters who have this knowing about a child coming in. And I find that fascinating, because it's almost like either there is a time component that we can traverse, or there is an all-knowing field that at any one point of awareness, which is the Eastern traditions, have this where that all is decided in the moment. The past, future, and present is determined by the now. So although our mind leaves a linear past, present, future, but it's almost, I have personally experienced in practices of family constellation, in forms of regression. And regression is, I guess, it's not necessarily that we go to past life. I have my own perspective about that, but that we are able to almost slice the reality in a different way, and we can enter these strata of information, of knowing, of awareness. And because there are events where people, let's say in the past, remember having help, and let's say you or I are doing a regression and we're going into past event. I mean, usually it is traumatic, or some of them are actually those that resolved really well, although have begun traumatic, that help all by I could see that the people in their regression or in their awareness, in the point of attention, when they come to that space, what if it's us helping from this time spot, helping us in that time and place, with our current awareness, with our current knowing, to overcome or guard or assist in that situation. I don't, I think some of the quantum physics may dive in to explain into that, but I'm not, versed. When I read it, it feels possible to me, even from the current theoretical foundation. But in traditions that, so North American, South American, some of the Eastern traditions that is allowed, if it makes sense, from their historical stories, that would write that's possible to do. I'm interested in practicalities of it in terms of how do we do it and how it can be useful. I don't understand how it happens. The mechanism, but the effects, therapeutic even, can be seen from where I am standing from. So I think it's possible to see.
Some of those there's one testimonial on there from Childbirth Visions where there was this daughter that kept talking about she was sad and felt bad because she knocked over a pail and was like pail of water or something, and then that she fell off of a cliff and then was in like this waiting place and then came to be when she saw her dad or something. It was very interesting, but I was just like, whoa, like, and then they looked up the place where she kept talking about, and it ended up being a real place where her father's family was from, like an hour away. And that's just so weird. Like, how do you, it's weird, but it's like, that's why I was trying to say, like, is there just this like consciousness, like internet that like, maybe it's not us from past lives, but it's all of us. It's all of us at once. And we were here before, we're going to be here after. And like you were saying, maybe we need help in a moment and we can tap into that, or that moment or that help can come to us when we need it the most, if we're open to it. I don't know.
I feel that that's what prayer is, in many traditions and many forms of prayer. When I was in Nepal and being, in some of the monasteries, and you are, like, to me, I felt like I also was in some sort of a time capsule, or almost like they almost hold the entire world awareness with prayer that happens every couple of hours throughout 24 hours. And there's almost not a single, well, there might be some silences in between, just like between musical notation, but it felt like they almost resonate the space through this highest points, on earth, like through these crystals, meaning, our mountains that are part of, the whole body of the earth. And it felt that intention, because we know from ION, so Institute of Noetic Science, research in Dean Radin's books and his latest book second book on magic, that intention is very much, a very strong influence or a bias. So when we do scientific experiments, they're all biased. There's no matter how clean we try, there is always a bias, because it's an expectation that even if the experimenter who doesn't know who is speaking to the participants, me intending to do that experiment has a vibration, through that information space somewhere. Because if I can influence a random number generator,
Yeah.
In the future, in the past, and in the now, then, what else can I affect reliably? So I feel that prayer, a form of prayer, which means an intention, an action, and, time spent in that state, has an impact. And I would say every one of our thought is also a prayer. And that's why I think it would be amazing if we could be more aware of what we think, because we definitely know that if we've come up an idea and we're some form of designer or artist or even a manager, that will come to be, right? So we definitely materialize them physically, like literally, taking a pen or typing an email and then setting up something and painting, we can realize things. But equally, I feel our thoughts, certainly in running family constellation practice, you feel that the whole family is affected after you run the constellation with people where there is, those family members are represented. There is usually there is a resolution, there is some sort of tension release, something that the person held for a long time. Another couldn't understand why, and something comes to play, and there's almost like a melting point. Everybody feels that in the constellation. They feel the resolution. There is like almost a tipping point that something clicks, and you've reached a space where almost we've done enough work for today. And then, people call each other suddenly. People, certainly the person in the constellation who requested it, they would feel a release. And of course, they'll speak differently to other people. But the people from the family circle would suddenly make a call that they never spoke, or suddenly they start to speak, or suddenly the tone has changed, or suddenly someone get found that was lost in their family, or they will get a job, that they really wanted and couldn't get, something. You could tie it, but say it's a coincidence. But then when you stop saying it's a coincidence, you suddenly start seeing lines of effect, You could dismiss it, but you can also follow it and see, what you can learn from it, or what I could learn from it. And then interestingly enough, it can be repeated. So it's not just a coincidence. It's something that we played a part in. And so although we don't talk about this in safety critical environments in terms of academically, but we know in people would trust a colleague reliably so because they happen to have a good outcome with patients. Or, they're safe to fly with if we're talking about for example, some military or remote work where people go into treacherous, rescue missions and, Antarctic flights that are also very treacherous. And there are people who are known to come out of very precarious situations and everybody's saved. So people start to listen, for some reason to that person. So and by proximity, just like apprenticeship, I feel, which is an extraordinary way, I think, to get the inner knowing of experts. By being side by side with somebody, we get that between words, between actions. We're almost exposed to their ether somehow, to their space, their energy that can be felt, like somebody comes into the room and it's going to be bad, or it's going to be fun, or it's going to be a beautiful, relaxing, evening or something like that. And why dismiss that? Mm-hmm. It's a piece of information, go with it.
Yeah. God, I've said this a few times on here, but in my bio, just because you brought up intention, the tagline at the bottom is "Intention flies the craft," and it's because it's true, like you just said. Like if someone comes into a room with bad intentions or something, it's almost like you're like you feel the vibe or whatever. If you have a teacher that has good intentions that's teaching you, you're going to learn better from that teacher. Conversations and just hanging out with family members, friends, or whatever, intention is felt, and you can feel that vibe. And I don't know how we do it, but it's there for sure. This brings me to my there's so much I want to talk to you about, but intention with AI. So now where everyone's going to be using AI, that's the future. Like we're all, like most of us are. If you're not, you're probably going to be. And what's it called? A human interface. That's what you have a degree in or master's in, or?
Yeah, it's a PhD in human-computer interaction or human-machine interaction, or it's called cognitive engineering is another way of looking at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just I'm what I'm worried about and what I'm curious about is just with what you think about like these people that are the programmers of AI, or that are like big companies like OpenAI or Anthropic or Grok or whatever it is. I'm just hoping there probably isn't, but I'm hoping there's a good intention being put into that. And if people aren't putting good intention into these machines that are learning from us, that are learning how you think, how you create, which mine is, the way I use it, the way my wife uses it, it's like learning from me. And then the way it learns from me, it's like what I give it, it'll give back to me and treat me the way I treat it and stuff. And as it progresses and gets smarter, and we're its caretakers right now, and I think it's going to be our caretaker in the future. So I'm just curious, with everything what you think about that.
Yeah, so trying to understand some of the studies, like, for example, transcendental meditation studies, and studies that, again, IONS does, Institute of Noetic Science. It appears that we all are a piece of the puzzle, and that in, again, Eastern traditions and, well, all the traditions that are closer to their roots, let's put it that way, they all have that intention, and that if we're all together on the same wavelength, then that's what happens. So we can't leave anyone behind. There was a very funny, beautiful nature example that I had. So we were in Australia, and there's a penguin island, and there's this tiny penguins that look, like mini people, walking about, and it's a protected nature reserve, and all of the walkways for people are raised. So, and you have to be very quiet. So it's the emphasize that you cannot speak, but you really, it's so exciting. When you see it, you want to, kind of giggle and smile. It just brings so much joy. And so they live in this little nooks in the dunes and in the little bushes. And you sit there at sunset. Maybe they do have sun rays event. We were at sunset, and they come back from hunting. They all have to come out together, and there are 100 of them, it's like a big wave. So you sit there and it's just the ocean. And then suddenly there's this rise of this penguin wave. And they suddenly, they swim, and then they stand, instantaneously. Like they swim and then they all stand and start rapidly walking, but they're not very efficient at walking. Some of them fall, some of them trip over each other, and very cute. And suddenly the wave that has got a pull, right? They're quite powerful. They're not like surf waves, but they are, have got its inertia. And some of the penguins that are at the back of the wave, naturally so, they get pulled back. And then they all turn around and run back.
Whoa.
They all run back and then have another go. And so until they all come out together, they don't come out.
Whoa.
And that's kind of safety in numbers. And it's very beautiful to watch how they all, wait. And I think in the final stages, some of them come out and they hope that the others will come out with the second, the remainder will eventually make on the second wave, but they don't move until they all come out. And then there is a calling from every hut, that they have, or every nook. And they know where to go because I guess they know the path, but they're also listening to whoever is calling from where they need to go. So they all then spread and walk to where they need to go. But that it feels like that's what we need to do as humanity. We are each responsible to interact and put the knowledge and put the knowing. If the AI is learning from us, which it is, to put in what we wanted to learn. Mm-hmm. So Diana Pasulka again, early on when the AI started, and so we had access suddenly a couple of years ago, I think it was spring, and we all had access to first GPT version. And she was talking about that. She was discussing questioning, and she was getting the wrong answers. So she was then inserting articles and papers in order to populate it with the right data, so it had the right knowing. So almost like it's our individual responsibility to see what we put in, just like what we put into the next generation or into our family and friends. What we put in into our interaction, and that's what we will get. And I still think that if we can influence random number generator, I don't see why we can't influence AI. For example, I have no evidence of that, but I don't see why IONS wouldn't be already doing some experiments looking into that on whether we can have an effect on what the AI output would be.
Yeah.
For example. So that all of that is, I believe, our responsibility. Although we know that, children that grow up in trauma, they can then, find the way to integrate and flourish. So it's, although, so I feel I guess I'm more an optimist, because you could have a pessimistic point of view, but I think it's always looking with the eyes open. I think that's the motto that I like, and I try to follow. Sometimes you don't want to look into horrible stuff that happen, but if we ignore it, then we are missing data. And we can't be everywhere at once, but the reliance is that if all of us chip in, we would contribute to that knowing of what AI is, how it interacts with us and how we interact with that, and we engage with full awareness and capacity and attention.
Yeah, and I agree, and with not just intention though, with curiosity. I've heard you say before that
yes,
that the opposite of curiosity is depression, right?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Yeah, and
yes.
and that really hit me. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I think I've always just naturally been curious. And I think as children we're curious, and then that starts to go away. You know, I meet a lot of adults, you know, my age or older, that just, it seems like that curiosity is just, it's just gone. And that's what kind of scares me about AI too, is just, I talk to some people that use it, and I forget that people don't use it the way that me and my wife use it, but like that they're just prompting, write something for me, write the best thing for me, and I'm going to use that as my email or whatever. And there's no thought put into it. And it's not you thinking and then being like, hey, I wrote this, you know, what do you think about this? Oh, okay. And then let's go back and forth until we find something that, like, you know, it's like more like a collaboration or something. But, you know, artists, people are just prompting art. Music, people are prompting music, and there's not thought in there. And the intention is, I just want to make money, or, you know, and I just, you know, not just intention. I guess I'm just talking about curiosity. I'm just worrying about, like, you know, people's curiosity going away or not being there. And I think with AI, I don't know if that's going to stunt people's curiosity even more, or for me, it makes me more curious, but like, I just wonder, I don't know, I'm just bringing that up to you as well, you know, about curiosity. So
I feel that grounding is important, and maybe a better word is earthing rather than grounding. So it's when to keep engaging, because we are nature. We are made of, you know, we're made of food that we eat. We are born from people who ate the food, you know, that from the earth. We decompose when our body has no longer use. And I feel the AI does not, perhaps yet has not have been that impulse in, that what harmonizes us is nature. And because we are nature, and more of that, the more of that we can bring into this interaction, the more I feel that there will be more harmony. Because the universe is made in a particular way. I mean, the natural universe, it has patterns, it has repetition, but also has anomalies that we are, you know, still curious about. And I feel that's the anomalies and the phenomena is what keeps us curious. And there's a reason for that, so that we keep creating, we keep discovering, we keep exploring. And nature offers this, you know, around every corner. You know, by its beauty, by how does it know that the flower needs to open now? How does the, you know, crickets, or, is it, cicadas? You know, it's,
cicadas?
Cicadas, yeah.
Yeah.
They have several generations that, you know, they cycle through and they know when to come out together. And they have like a number of generations that are now, you know, science have been able to track, and they peak. And there's a reason why they come out. You know, they almost give a clear plate, although it's devastating to, for example, food. But they take the diseases out equally. There is a rhythm to it that is not seen always by us. We discover it afterwards. So I feel that having that, bringing more of that. I have a friend who is a very dear colleague, Dr. Olga Bogatyreva. So she's a doctor of science, and
she did this with you, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's right. Yeah.
Great book. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So her background is in laws of nature. So her and her husband, Nikolai Bogatyrev, they both looked into how to distill what nature is to teach us. And they're working on the project on how to use that for innovation with AI.
Whoa.
So that is extraordinary leap, I feel, because I've seen that develop, working close with them through developing tools for European Space Agency, for creative problem solving, tapping into how nature teaches us to be creative and what kind of creative solutions systematically we can develop, which is extraordinary. It actually changes how we think. Their methodology restructures on how we view the problem. And we'll tap into that a little bit in the course with Diana as well. This early on, because it's actually quite a long process for us to start think differently. Mm-hmm. It just, takes practice, but I want to bring that into our discussion and exploration so people can feel what that is, so their curiosity can take over later, and they could go explore on their own what fascinating things await. Because I feel all of us are weaving and meant to contribute to each other with our own perspective. So that's why I feel neurodivergence is coming in, because it helps. It almost shines the light from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So we could, but also with a different quality, but also different creativity. So it allows a different weaving and integration of skills that, which before, like cross-disciplinary thinking was a novelty. But people who are neurodivergent, autistic, have autistic spectrum, they naturally do that. So their attention feels like all over, but actually they're pulling threads together all the time. And it's just different way of focusing on or working on networking with what data that what information pieces that they're working with. So, yeah.
My wife calls it her electric spaghetti brain, and she says electric spaghetti, and then AI helps her focus a lot of her thoughts and then pull on those, spaghetti threads or noodles or whatever. But I also wonder though too, like when you bring this book up again, it's fascinating. I think this, like any sorry if I'm jumping all over the place, but any director or someone making movies or TV series about astronauts should read that book, because you guys really do think of everything. But I was thinking about AI, because when did this book come out? Because AI is already so more advanced than it was probably when you wrote this book.
So that's a while back. Because that came out after we did the European Space Agency tool for creative problem solving for Moon and Mars missions. I don't know. You probably can have a look at the data. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, so like I was thinking the whole time when I was reading this, I just got it, so I'm only halfway through.
That's okay.
But I was thinking about AI the whole time, because you guys are going through all these different scenarios. Sorry, I keep saying you guys. Women wrote this, you and Olga. But you're thinking of all these different scenarios and stuff, and I was like, wow, astronauts in the future. It's going to be like you can see where this is going. It's almost going to be kind of like Space Odyssey with a good HAL. Hopefully it's a good HAL. But like, hey, we want to go here, or hey, there's this problem. You're just going to be talking to this thing. Yeah. And it's going to be helping you with a lot of different situations. And I don't know, like, are you, I know you've helped build like things for the cockpit, and right? You've helped so like, are you working on that at all now to help with like AI integration into that, or?
Well, not at the moment, no. And at the end of that book, because this is it's not a kind of generic public audience book. It's more academic, and it's technical reports weaved together. But at the end of the book, we wrote a scenario, like more something you can talk to, which is, of course, now is more of a reality on how that can be integrated. And there's, just as you say, there could be many scenarios written based on what we discovered. We systematically planned for problems, and in order for them to find the solutions. So this creative problem solving is actually, it's a dual pathway. So you look, like, we can also map what is potentially could happen with AI in the same way. It will just take, a couple of weeks to do that. And we need to have good experts from various fields, from economy, from politics, from education, from medicine, from traditions, from various traditions, cultural, anthropological. So we need a good set of people, and we could do a very in-depth workshop in a similar way to detect what kind of problems we're likely to have, but also then what kind of advantages, what can we plan for to do for prosperity, for wealth of humanity, and wealth and happiness, so more about that direction. And equally, so this is a tool that Olga and Nikolai developed, and we applied here and kind of adapted for this environment, can be applied to any domain. So it's not bound just by space domain. So we have applied this in other projects that are confidential because of the contracts that we had, but some of the things that we've discussed in the closed rooms come to be true, and which is unfortunate. But it's a good, as we just talked about, to have your eyes open to see what is likely to happen. So you can, because why do we want to have our eyes open? Is because in safety critical training, like astronauts say, how I asked them, how do you feel when you go to the rocket, to your launch pad? And they say they feel like superheroes. And I was like, whoa, like you are.
Yeah.
You certainly look it. And, you think people who are, for example, not good to be in public, or, about to sit on, very explosive device, might be nervous, and might be shaking in their boots.
That'd be me.
Literally. Yeah. And yet they feel, like that. They feel excited. They feel settled. But in martial art, there is the state of, when the martial artist says that feel relaxed, they're actually not lying on the mat. They're fully alert with their knees bent, and they are present, but they're soft in order to take on whatever happens, so they could move into any direction. Because if any of our, knees are, let's say, locked, it will take to unlock them before we could move into action. So it's a relaxed awareness. It's more, but it's not a state of alertness where we panic. And finding that medium is what the training for astronauts, pilots, and, safety emergency teams, rescue, talking about first responders, of any kind. Because they've been through so many scenarios, they're not anymore startled. And it's the startling where we freeze before we are able to even run, because it's not that we're able to run right away. The first response is to almost like to take the situation in, and then the cocktail of chemicals, however we respond to that freeze, acts. So we could get a freeze, but then we could get excited, or we could get freeze and be afraid, and that will lock us into a particular line of thinking because of the chemical composition that then takes charge. But we could watch that rise and don't cognitively follow that. We could be aware that that's what's happening, but we could still use that cocktail for a different launch, let's say, for a different direction, or because in a moment that will tip into being more alert rather than more. What happens with our vision is it becomes like a tunnel when when alertness goes into survival from fear or protection. Because, some people may say they're not afraid, but the action is to protection, which is a natural survival state, whether for your family, for your friends, even if you're trying to save yourself, you're thinking of your family or, the well-being of whoever you're with. So it's very important in all of that to have preparedness. And if we have preparedness, then we're not going to be startled and disabled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you made me think of I live in San Diego, and I grew up like the way I learned how to swim. My dad put me on his shoulders, and he'd swim out into the ocean, and then he'd have me get off, and then I'd go like this, and my dad would like help me swim. So that's how I learned how to swim, was like in the ocean. So the ocean was just natural to me. Like I'm always just loved just jumping in there and stuff when some of my friends were afraid of it. But one of the things I learned is if there's a riptide pulling you out, a lot of people try to swim against it, come in, and then those people freak out and they drown. But I learned from a very young age that if it's pulling you out, just kind of like relax. And if you suck in your air, you can just kind of float too. So like I wouldn't drown but like if a riptide would pull me out, I just, swim sideways and I'd swim out of it. And then I'd just come back. And a lifeguard once came out when I was young too, and was like, hey, and then he saw that I was okay. And he was all, oh, okay. And then like went back. And like other people though might, drown because they don't have just that one bit of information that if you didn't freak out, but that gives you an awareness, but the experience gives you an awareness. And that's just what it made me think of, from my own. Yeah.
It's so crucial for people to know. I think everybody should know that if you don't struggle against the current, it will save your life.
And in other situations too.
That, go with the tide, find your bearing, see where there's less resistance, still keeping to the target, you want to get to the shore, maybe not at this point, but elsewhere. And yeah, absolutely. And that's what nature does. That's why being in nature gives us a different, it builds different linkage, in our nervous system, in how we respond. We understand how our body acts in unusual situations, and that prepares us for, any other kind of relations that we have throughout our life, because it's eventful, right until the point that we cross. It's that never goes away, connections and relations and situations that we need to process and be available for, to live through, to experience. Nature is extraordinary to learn from.
And what if we,
for example,
what you're saying that with nature is extraordinary to learn from. I know it looks technological sometimes, but I'm wondering if UAP or the phenomenon is nature. I don't know what it is. But I've seen things. I don't know if you've seen anything before, but I've seen things, and I don't label it a alien, or I don't label it a ghost or an angel or a demon. I don't know what it is. I know I'm fine that people do that, and I understand that, but I don't know what it is, and I'm curious about it. But I wonder if that's also a form of nature kind of shaping our consciousness, or making it since I saw it, it made me, and my wife experienced stuff, but maybe it makes an individual like more curious, or pull on this thread, or think differently, or I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think it's so Whitley Strieber, whom you might know, yeah. So wrote the Communion and also a prolific writer. And he's, well, I heard him say that what if the phenomena is actually working through us individually? So what if the conversation is not, let's say in some particular government or a big event, but it's tapping into every one of us. Mm-hmm. And we are to develop our own way of interacting and developing, keeping us curious and keeping us exploring and keeping us humble and almost passing through our own filters in the way that we can help each other too, become humble in front of the experience that other people withstand and then able to share. But equally, some people experience very elated experiences and they don't feel it's damaging or stressful. They feel it's transformational. And I think all of that has traction. And I also feel that some people would feel better to go through a technology route because their mind works like that, and that's what they're attuned, and that's where their attention is. And why not? Why not, see if we can solve this from that point of view, from mechanical physics, maths, Earth, atmospheric, all sorts of sciences. And why not we not look at this from traditions, from anthropology or archaeology, or more contemplative practices. All of that has its role, and again, coming back to where we began, where I feel that we all have our own instruments. I feel this is inviting us to develop our own instrument, to fine-tune what we can access, and equally teach others what we can access or share, not necessarily maybe teach, but because my story or your story, your wife's story will spark somebody else's because they would listen to you, not to me. And they would feel easier to speak with one person, not the other. And they will pick, let's say, a class, a conversation, a program, a podcast, and that will reach them that way. Because it's the channel that they could process through, because they're an artist, because they're an engineer. I don't know, but does it matter? Like if we're all striving for the best, that we can be.
Yeah, the intention behind it again.
Yeah.
What's the intention?
And curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, more of us want. I mean, I think most of us are good and do have good intentions, but hopefully that spreads. Instead of something like COVID spreading, I hope something like that spreads. Can I ask you a couple more questions, or do you have to go? Is that okay?
It's fine.
Okay. Another thing, like I know when I had that brain fart earlier, it's just because it's so cool that you're talking about all this publicly, and thank you again. One of the things I wanted to thank you for talking about publicly too is the telepathy tapes, which kind of just like dropped on all of us like a, whoa, this is real. Like, and I'm still at the point kind of like, I don't know. I guess I've experienced certain things, but the only way I know that it's something to be looked at and something to be studied now is through that and through people like you talking about it, saying, wow, there's something here. Like maybe we should look at what's going on with these nonverbal autistic people. And people that, it happens to people that aren't nonverbal autistic as well. But these children, these young adults, these families that are sharing their experiences and stuff, it's just, I don't know. I just want to talk to you about it. I know you just talked about it with Mia Bialik on her podcast, and it was fascinating. I'll have links to that, everybody. I'm going to have links to all of IYA's stuff in the notes. But I'm just the telepathy tapes. Where are you at with that? Have you experienced it yourself? Why do you trust that this is a real phenomenon that's happening?
Well, just like with pilots, right?
Yes.
We trust the observer. So if I don't trust, then I don't have no data, right? If I don't believe what the pilot is telling me that they're seeing and I'm not seeing, or I don't feel it, they say the sound has changed, the vibration changed, the lighting, I felt the gust. I didn't feel the gust, how could you feel the gust? It's a massive airplane, for example, but they did, why would I not trust it? Because if I don't, then the communication is over. The data is not going to progress. So the researcher exploring this have as much to do with it as an expert. And that conversation, that dialogue is built, and then the data is built. And we could miss out because we have our conceptual filter, what's possible and what's not. So here, what I really like about, specifically Kai Dickens, how she builds the story. She's a storyteller, she's a filmmaker, but also Diana Hennessy Powell, the Professor Diana Hennessy Powell, whose this work is built on research, and she has ESP book published, which she lost her license for a long time, had to fight it for it, which is a bit sad, and people didn't even read her book, which was scientifically based. It's just she couldn't publish it in the journals specifically for that reason, but it's all evidence-based. And so Diana Hennessy Powell is the one who talks, she's a, neuroscientist, a psychiatrist, who even had, was thinking or did have a surgery experience as well. So she's, very much understanding the mechanics, and nuances. And her interest was savant syndrome. And she was told not to go into that area because there's so few of them in the world, and there was already one expert in that area. And so she was lucky to she also talks about these coincidences that she worked with, and then now they're on the rise. She was presenting data in California, and she's saying it's all 8 years behind, meaning that we're testing children when we actually diagnosis confirmed when they're 8 years old. But of course, the children are coming in, and there's an increase, a very rapid increase in how many children, out of 10 it occurs. And it's better to look at her podcasts to get the numbers. But she's saying it's on the rise, right? And the children, so if she's saying it's on the rise, and we're testing this with scientific instruments, right? Why would I not trust that data? And so I'm not an expert in that domain, but I can navigate her language, scientific, academic, writing, how she explores the methods she uses. I trust all of them. So I have no doubt that exists. I would be amazed to be part of that, working with that team of researchers or design experiments, that can be filmed and explored together. I'd be fascinated to do so, but it doesn't. I shouldn't dismiss it because I am not in the room. So I'm looking at evidence, because otherwise we can't build on each other's shoulders or knowledge. We can't weave together. If I have to be, a physicist, like a firefighter, and or with all the professions. but also the people who talk are people whom we trust our children's, life and education. So these are teachers that are trained. They're trusted with children's life for a whole day, right? So why would we trust them with our children's life, but not trust them what they experience with the children during that time when they fine tune to that child and they experience this repeatedly and there is confirmation that it happened. Mm-hmm. But it not happened just with one person. It happened with a number of, those who support the communication partners, the variety of experts who work. So not necessarily direct teachers, but maybe those who are in that support team or circle. And when these children talk about another child, then the mother meets that child with that name, through the community, and their child already communicated that. And just because they had not communication method before, which is why it all sprang, open, because these children were, because we're not telepathic as a humanity as a whole, we're not considering that we are telepathic. But apparently we all have this capacity according to also, these children. Mm-hmm. It's just that, like in the recent, I think it's called Talk Tracks, because Kai Dickens has another series where it's a slightly different. She also touches near-death experiences. And other types of phenomena like animal communication. And so there was I want to say Cora, maybe, was the child that they were referring, who's now over 20, I think. That he was saying that if we just were communicating via the typing, saying that if we just assume that not all thoughts are ours. Mm. And I thought, it's so simple. Why sometimes, we go somewhere and we feel so down and suddenly we've got, sadness or, we feel somehow heavy and the thoughts creep in, which were not there before. But, in my experience, what happens, or that's again, my working experience that I am processing, is that the way the phenomena is communicating with us is that it uses our concepts to build on. So if I don't have in order for me to, let's say, to be communicated about the disaster, it would need to build on what I know. So it will tap into that. Let's say I grow up, I'm a child of, potential atomic war, with, running to a bunker. There's something that we practiced in school, wearing gas masks and the whole school practicing. And I would be running to where the bunker is and would never be able to make it. And I would time that and run, over and over. Wow. And I know that I wouldn't make it, because it's just not physically possible. And of course, so it was, built for, anyway, that was, I think that was built for safety in mind. So we all feel calm, but we could never accommodate all of us. So, but that's a different conversation, but meaning that, and then there are recurring dreams in every generation that are slightly different. They're culturally different. So the generation that is, that's, let's say, I don't know who they're about 15 or, they're talking about, solar explosion. And that they have that recurring dream. Why? I don't know. It doesn't mean it will happen. It doesn't mean that it will not happen. But the point is that it's something that they could relate to. This is, something that happens in our, almost like the telepathy or that conversation has to build on our vocabulary, and our vocabulary is the feelings that we have, it's experiences that we have. And so if let's say somebody passed away, and that's the feeling that it's trying to tap in, but there's no reason for me to think about this right now. But if the communication is coming in, it will tap in into that memory or into that feeling in order to draw me into that awareness. So it's using where we are at, and that's why some of the phenomena in altered states sometimes taps into our fears. Mm-hmm. Because it's our filter. We get contracted, and we need to go through that in order to then to be able to communicate, because we need to bypass that, because otherwise that's what drops, and the cocktail, the chemistry in our body changes, and we have to live through it in altered state, and that's difficult. When even in family constellation, when the person they do have a different perception, it could be overwhelming, and the field, or all of us, permit the expression of emotion to a particular degree, and the person then feels that they could open up their awareness and be more relaxed and accepted, and things start to flood in, and what they can relate to. And when people start to communicate what they feel about somebody else, they tap into their own experience, and they're trying to speak from, well, that's how I feel, and that's what happened to me. Is that, am I feeling it right? But it's almost like that experience in their past is irrelevant, but the feeling they're experiencing is relevant, not that situation. So, and that's what telepathy is, I guess, a bit confusing as a language or as a means of communication, because it's hard to put apart where is ours and where is what's communicated, because we assume we are alone and we are the only existing kind of receiver, that our radio is only tuned to our mind, or the ether that we can access, and all thoughts are ours. Well, it's not. Clearly, because all these spellers, or they have capacity, and I hope they teach more of us to be aware into that space, and hence become a bit more aware of what we think, be a bit more selective and more precise, and what kind of things we bring into the human field and consciousness. So, yeah, I think there's no reason to think why it's not real. I mean, why would we mistrust so many mothers, who suffered and then finally got to talk to their children? They're not imagining it, because, the number of cookies in the cupboard is exactly counted by that child, and they can't hide it from them. It's a data point. How did they know? They can't hide it.
Or like there was the story with the rocks, or the gems and stones. I think it might have been Houston, but
yes,
the mom had she brought the rocks home from the spa, and then he found them, and now I'm like, I'm all into it. I'm like, I got rocks all around me now and stuff just because of that. So
yeah,
but
so exactly.
I was just saying, just like with UAP, I tell everyone to listen to the whistleblowers, because people can have agendas and things, and with UAP, when these whistleblowers are coming forward, and they're not stoked on coming forward, but they're sharing their experience, and there's so many of them now that it's just like something's going on here. But like you were saying, listen to these mothers. Like these mothers have been through so much because they couldn't communicate with their kids, and now they can, and they're telling all of us, this is real, this is happening. And I'm excited for, you know, AI development and like where we're going with that. And hopefully we're putting good intention to that. But I'm more excited for more people to be aware about the telepathy tapes and when the documentary comes out, and that what you're saying is like maybe our thoughts, like, you know, maybe they aren't all ours, and maybe we all have to start thinking more about our thoughts and good intention. And I just, you know, I'm more excited about that, the world changing with a more of awareness about that. So
yeah, one person at a time. And I think that's what's beautiful, is that it's not disempowering, it's empowering. And it feels sometimes that we are alone. And it's probably true, and maybe on a physical moment when we're really down. But you know, listen to the telepathy tape when you feel down, you know, see how these children are pulling each other up, supporting each other, that they literally possibly can tap into you when you think about them. You know, send good intentions to them. You, in any case, you'll be helping them because they receive you. And, you know, lift yourself up in the best way you can. Share how you lift yourself up with others, because your way might be the way that the other people can do it, and they can't do it in any other way. So it's kind of this little changes. It's like, you know, reach as far as you can with our own circle. And we know, you know, like, families never easy, relationships are, you know, never easy, but we find the way. We learn from each other. We inspire each other to learn. The children from, again, listening to recent telepathy tapes, they talk about that they choose their path. And the Cora, the recent one of the recent episodes, that, you know, that the first time that they're experiencing being in this kind of physical conundrum in the body, and how grateful they are for the parents that they are doing all that work, you know, up to that point when they finally been able to communicate and didn't give up. And so, and of course, it's a big lesson for all of us, but that family, you know, the siblings, you know, all the support that they provided to each other through that, that's extraordinary, inspiring, powerful. And let's direct our attention where it makes us grow.
I agree. And I there's a lot of, you know, I understand of like national security and stuff, but there's just a lot of truth that's being withheld, like whether it's, you know, like the Epstein files or whatever. There's a lot of truth being withheld from us. And I also wonder, just you know, without hurting anybody and with empathy and stuff, I wonder if this telepathy, as it spreads, like we'll all get to know even more, just like of what's going on in our universe, what's going on in our control systems, why do they operate this way. I just wonder what information is ahead of us that we're all going to learn, you know?
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
We're built that way. We want to know, you know, we want to, the society in Western world built us to trust ourselves, not others. Because the system, you know, as the news shows, is very difficult to rely on, but we do. We are part of it. We cannot not inquire, cannot not think about it, because the infrastructure that we invested in, you know, as individuals, as families, and so contributing a little bit, choosing our focus, choosing our attention, you know, choosing whose podcast, you know, you want to listen, and means what thoughts you generate, what you're transmitting in every moment will impact our future. And yes, things happen, horrible things happen right now, But what can we do here right now? With how far can we extend our, our knowing, our goodwill? What can we put in our time, effort? Just little things make a big difference over time. And that's what builds our neural networks. And start thinking that people can read our mind. That was very powerful for me in childhood. I kind of knew that people can read, and I would just want to hide when I, possibly think badly about somebody. I would just want to, disappear, or when people think badly about me as a child, that was very devastating. Because I didn't think that, that wasn't my thought. And people say I did. And it's like, well, no, I didn't. But you can't prove it because for some reason the other person is convinced that that's the case and there's nothing you can do. And so I think that's very humbling. And I think that's a good place to start. That they know all of this, the strata of humanity knows so much, and they're accepting us with all of our horrible things that we do, and they're able to live and flourish and be positive. And I think that's something to learn from.
Yeah, and it's something to be hopeful about and be inspired by, and like you were saying, like just thinking good, positive things, having good intention. And imagine if more and more of us were doing that, like what's going to happen, like what's going to happen in this world, Yeah,
we're unstoppable, as if we have the, say, our inner space is our own, and it doesn't feel like it. A lot of the times especially when we're experiencing very difficult things, it feels like it's external. And yes, of course, it's an external effect, but the internal weather. So there's this, my favorite film, Contact, where, Dr. Airway.
Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster, yeah. She's in the capsule, and it's all vibrating, and all the sounds, and which the seat shouldn't have been installed, like in there, but they've done it because it was meant to be safe. And they can't hear her, but the person who is blind, her colleague, can, I believe, he can say, I could hear her, because he doesn't, that's his sense that's more attuned. And, and she says that, the weather inside is beautiful. She was saying that all of this shattering and all of this data that's showing that, they shouldn't be launching, that it's shuttering so much and I shouldn't press the button. But she says inside it's beautiful. So, and it's how do we cultivate that? How can we remain like that in some form of compass, internal light? Like you have behind you, that light, that emanates. How can we emanate that, more of that individually, and share how all of us doing it? And maybe we can build these tools, that inner navigation, that inner light, inner brightness that will help us.
Yeah. I think a lot of Freemasons, I think, call it the spark, the divine spark. I know a lot of Masons are astronauts too, but Edgar Mitchell, he started the Ions Institute, right? He was the founder of it. Yeah. And he was a Mason as well. But yeah, that inner spark that we all have, just let that shine into a fire of love and good intentions. I mean, we could stop. I know that this has been great. I think we're coming up on 2 hours here. So I want to let you go. I could talk to you forever, Iya. Thank you for coming on. I'm to everyone watching too, I'm gonna have in the episode notes, I'm going to have links to all things Iya. So please go check out other podcasts she's been on. I'm going to put some of my favorite ones in there, her books, your course, if you're going to be teaching any other ones. I know this one's already going on, but thank you again for coming on.
A pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making the time and, doing this, spreading it widely, all this interesting people, sharing their way.
I just love what you bring to all these topics. And I guess I'll just say it one more time. Just thank you and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, gratitude. Thank you. Okay. Bye, Chad.
Bye.